I'd like to introduce you to the Professor Escofferey, which is my professor here at Palm Beach State College. She's a fantastic professor. Now, Professor, my first question here is, how long have you been a college professor, roughly?
Okay, I'm glad you said roughly, because I was trying to remember the exact year. It's about 15 years.
About 15 years.
About
That's
15 years.
quite a bit of experience.
Yes.
Right.
I started when I was 5. No.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, so, yeah. And most of it has been here at Palm Beach State College. I also taught, not as a college professor, but as a teaching assistant
Right.
at FAU for about 2 years prior to being hired full-time here at the college. So it's been a while.
Excellent. And now, I'd just like to say that you did request that your face not be shown, so
Yeah.
for the viewers, just so they're not confused. All right. And now, can you tell me a bit about your education? What degrees or certificates do you have?
Okay. I have, my undergraduate degree is in social psychology, and I did that at the University of Houston and then completed it at FAU because we moved from Houston. And then I have a master's in communication, which I also earned at Florida Atlantic University. So I started at University of Houston, then finished at Florida Atlantic, and then did the master's at Florida Atlantic.
All right, excellent. And I'm in your Fundamentals of Speech
Right.
Communication
Yes.
class. Tell me, what is that class all about?
Oh, it's an awesome class. It's what we call a survey or a blend course, in that it's not strictly focused on public speaking. It covers the foundation of communication. So you learn about all the different aspects of communication. Almost every topic we cover in class, you can take an entire course in that.
Right.
So you could take a course in intercultural communication, in verbal communication, nonverbal communication. You can specialize in the different areas. So it introduces the student to all different aspects of communication. And then towards the end of the semester, we focus on public speaking, so that you have the fundamentals, and then you start to really put all that foundational work into use as you present your speeches, and hopefully gives you a really strong foundation.
And also, you've said that the class provides an advantage, definitely, that it will be worth a lot when you transfer as well.
Yes, absolutely. And you'll find that so many of the theories we cover will help you to understand other things you're doing in other disciplines. We cover topics that are covered in sociology, in psychology. We talk a little bit about politics, a little bit about history. So, because communication is what binds us as human beings. So it's part of every subject that you do.
Exactly.
So I think it's what's always been great for me is when students say, this was not what I expected, but I'm so glad I took the class. Because everybody expects it to be public speaking, and they're going to have to get up there, and it's going to be so scary. And I think they come in, they learn stuff. You still have to give the speeches, but students realize it's not as bad as I thought, and I'm much better at this than I thought, which is a very positive outcome.
Definitely. So, in your class, what does a student need in order to succeed? What characteristics would help a student out the most?
That was one of the hard questions. I think I thought about this long and hard when I saw the question, because you graciously gave me the questions beforehand. And I think an open mind, a willingness to learn, to give things a chance,
Okay.
and dedication. The students are always going to need dedication, but more than anything else, an open mind. For some students, if they think, well, it's just public speaking, especially students who are confident, oh, there's nothing for me to learn. And then they miss half of what we have to give. And then other students, if they come and they're just so scared, again, that's going to put them at a disadvantage. But if they have an open mind, then they're going to find out we're covering things that they do every day in their lives, but I'm giving theories to support stuff that you can say, oh, that happened to me. Oh, now I understand. So An open mind, I think, would be the best, what I would ask for most.
Okay, definitely. And not only in your class specifically, but that would definitely apply to all the classes, you would think. All right. And now, in this class, what do you as a professor do to help the students succeed?
Hopefully make them relax, bring in a little bit of humor, and also try to use myself as an example to show them the mistakes, especially when it comes to public speaking, to show them I've made mistakes and I've survived, and we're all here to grow and to learn. We can always improve. I also try to use examples that students can relate to so that the information is more than just something I'm reading about in a textbook, but it's something that students can think, oh, I can apply this to my life. And that's one of the reasons I began introducing the idea of the extra credit, where students take something that we talk about in class, and if they can come up with an example from their own lives, they'll get extra credit, which is great for the student, but more importantly, it helps them to answer that question that I think everyone asks. What does this have to do with me and my life?
Right.
And so I try to make them see how this information connects to their lives, to what they're doing, how it can enhance their lives.
All right. And now, this is only the middle of the semester, but I'd just like to ask, how am I doing so well? How am I doing so far?
Wonderful. You're doing really, really well. And part of that, we haven't had that many graded assignments, but you've done an excellent job in those. You've also turned in quite a few of the extra credits, and that also helps me to see the depth of your understanding of some of the issues. Because in class, we don't have time to discuss everything as fully as we would like to. So I really enjoy getting the extra credit, the thoughtfulness of it, the insights of it, just how you wrestle with certain problems. And that to me shows, remember I said the whole idea of an open mind?
Right.
Well, the way you answer the extra credits does show, okay, you're making this more than, who do you think should do X, Y, and Z? Well, you could answer, I think this group or that group. Instead, you twist and turn the question. Well, we could look at it this way. You make it more abstract, and then you bring it back around to maybe what we were talking about in class. So based on that, I'm predicting you're going to do an excellent job in class
for
this semester.
And now, this might be a tough one. This would be a question that I would consider tough. What is a professor's job, and how does it differ from a high school or middle school teacher's job?
Right, that was one of the tough ones, and if I'm going to be fair, it's not one I can completely answer because I've never taught at the middle school or high school level, so I would not want to presume to speak for those instructors.
Okay.
I would say, though, that I think in middle and high school, I personally would think that the instructor's job is a little different, and I think a little bit harder in the sense that they're responsible for discipline as well as for teaching the subject, and the younger the student, the more the instructor has to know how to teach.
Right.
Which I actually think is a good skill for all of us. In grad school, I took a couple of courses in college teaching, but that's not the emphasis. When you get to college, the emphasis is on content knowledge.
Right.
The high school and middle school teacher has to know, how do I connect to this type of learner? And because the community college, different from the university, our focus is on teaching and learning. At the university, their focus is on teaching, but also on publishing. So when we go for development training, we get a lot of training, again, in how to teach to student staff. That would make it a little bit more, like the high school level, different from the university level, where you have a textbook and your instructor says, well, I want you to read these 3 chapters and then write me a paper.
Right.
We're going to focus a little more on making sure that the information connects to the student. So in that sense, that might be a little bit more like high school or middle school. But I think a professor's job is to introduce a student to concepts, to help a student to almost, force is a harsh word, but for want of a better word, to force a student to start to think critically, not just to cram information at you that you can eloquently regurgitate, but to have you think about things. So if my students leave my class, I expect them to be able to deliver a good, solid speech, but even more, to be able to think about what is the purpose of the speech, who is my audience, how do I adapt, to take this information and be able to think critically about how they present themselves and their information in all kinds of settings outside of the classroom. Right. Whereas I think at the high school and middle school level, we need you to have a certain amount of information. You have to leave there with a certain amount of information so I can say you've passed this class and this exam. Right. And I think at the college level, you're also going to get the information, but you need to go to those higher level cognitive skills. You've got to learn to think.
Right. I definitely agree with that.
Okay, is that what you found?
Yes, in high school and middle school, the difference would be definitely, I think, that I found that I think the teachers are not, they don't feel as responsible to the student, or perhaps it seems more of a job. And I think that you were definitely right in saying that the high school and middle school teachers have to focus on how to teach. I'm very glad that you went in depth.
Yeah, and they're more restricted too, because we have a lot of freedom in terms of how we interpret our curriculum. But within the high schools and the middle school, again, the teachers they're a little bit more restricted. So right. It is definitely, it's different.
Yes, definitely. And how much would you say is a student's success dependent on their professor?
Before we go to that one, I also want to interject that a lot of our adjunct instructors at the college are high school teachers. Okay. So a lot of the high school teachers are able to, teach at the college level. I didn't want to imply that it was different and only certain people can do one or the other. And I think, like I said, I personally believe teaching at the younger ages presents those instructors with a lot of challenges. I have tremendous admiration for high school and middle school teachers. I think those are the most difficult years because the students' identities are just forming too, so you have a lot to cope with.
Absolutely.
So totally in admiration. Okay, how much would you say is a student's success dependent on their professor?
Right.
Now that one is tricky too. Am I trying to absolve myself of responsibility? I think it's important to have a good professor, a good instructor, but I also think, and I go back to when I was in college, back in the dinosaur years, that even if you have an instructor if you have a bad instructor, to me a bad instructor would be an incompetent instructor, someone who didn't know their subject matter. A bad instructor is not necessarily a boring instructor. You might have a boring instructor, and I think as a student you have to rise above that, because you can't say, well, I'm not going to learn because this person is boring. It's part of your responsibility to find ways to connect to the information. So in an ideal world, the professor's job is to be scintillating, to be interesting, to be competent, to be knowledgeable, to be fair. That's what I would wish for. But I think a student has to realize, even if an instructor may not be the most exciting instructor, they still have something to offer, and if both of us come together and there's synergy in the classroom, you can actually have a better experience. So a student's success is going to be partially dependent on the professor, but partially dependent on the student. They've got to bring something to the interaction, just like any audience. As a speaker, you have to bring something. You have to have your information. You have to be organized, plan it out, be entertaining. But you're going to need a little bit of something from that audience.
Definitely.
You really are going to. So I think it's a synergistic type of relationship.
Right. I'd say it's definitely hard to quantify.
Yes.
It's.
I'm not trying to absolve the instructors. I know they're bad professors and boring professors, but it's more than that. It's that. What we said in class when we talked about listening, we're co-creators of meaning. Right. So we're both involved in the student's success.
Definitely. And now, starting to get a little bit easier, hopefully.
Okay.
What do you enjoy about being a professor?
I suppose this is a cliched answer, but it's a cliche
bit.
for a reason because it's really true. The students, every semester, I think I've heard it all, oh, I'm going to be so jaded. And not just every semester, but every class is different. The energy in every class is different. Students may, because I have a speech class, I'm even more fortunate because I get to hear from my students a lot.
Right.
And they're so incredibly interesting. Even when students talk about a topic I've heard before, no two students will ever do the same topic in the same way. And then I'm able to go out and I have all these examples and people will say to me, your job must be so interesting because I have all these stories. And I'm like, well, it's my students who are so interesting. So I feel privileged to have the opportunity to learn from my students and hopefully to teach them, to leave them with something that they find memorable. But it's a very humbling privilege because you learn from your students and you realize, especially in a speech class, how gracious they are in sharing a part of themselves. And for some students, they come in so nervous and then they leave having shared something they've not shared with anyone else before, but also feeling more confident that I have a voice, I have something to say, and I can do it. And so that's very cool. I find that really awesome.
Excellent. And now, what do you find to be somewhat difficult or challenging about being a college professor?
Keeping the students interested, keeping them off the cell phones during class. I know it might sound trivial, but really making sure that I keep it fresh because I'm teaching the same subject. I've taught different subjects, I've taught feature and freelance writing, I've taught group communication, interpersonal communication, public speaking, and fundamentals, but most of my classes are in fundamentals. And even though it's new for each student each semester, I still want to make sure that I don't get complacent.
Right.
So that I can try and make sure I'm reading to keep the information current. The fundamentals don't change, but you can use current examples. Statistics will change. Some things are classic, and there's some things that I use that I've been using for a long time, but they work so well. So you don't want to get rid of the classic stuff just because, but at the same time you want to keep it fresh. Make sure that my enthusiasm, that the students can feel that, so that they feel enthusiastic, so that we're not all sleepwalking. So that part is what's really challenging, to try to motivate the students and keep them enthusiastic about the subject.
Definitely.
And I'm, willing to give chocolates and cookies in class.
All right. And you kind of already led into this. What are some other classes you've taught during your career?
Yes, I did mention. And when I was at FAU, or I taught as an adjunct at FAU after I graduated, so I taught feature and freelance writing, taught small group communication, interpersonal communication, public speaking, and then this class of fundamentals. Yeah, those are the ones that I taught.
All right, so everything in communications,
yes,
definitely.
Yes,
would
it's all been in communication.
Would you say that's your area of expertise?
Yes, definitely.
All right.
Definitely.
And so, out of all of those classes, which are the ones that you like to teach the most, would you say?
I would probably say the fundamentals because it allows me to cover a little of all the others. Even with the feature and freelance. So I would say the 1017 because it touches on all different aspects, and what's very cool is it offers a little bit of something to every student. So a student who doesn't like public speaking, we cover a lot of other things, but for students who like public speaking, we have that too. And you might find a student who is into mass communication, we're going to touch on that. Or a student who's good at languages, I can touch on that. So hopefully I can tease them a little bit into thinking, oh, there's more to this communication than I thought. And so that would be my favorite class to teach.
Definitely. And now, what classes are somewhat less your favorite? Or maybe if it's not just a class, specific sections or details, subjects, we'll say.
Subjects, okay, that are the least favorite. Boy, when I'm teaching a new class and I'm prepping for it, I wouldn't say it's my least favorite, but I'll be much more nervous about that as I'm, am I going to get this point across? Once you've taught a certain class for a certain amount of time, you know the areas where, okay, I have to work a little harder on this, or let me try a new strategy with that. But when you're teaching a subject for the first time, or you haven't taught it in a long time, then I think I worry more. I wouldn't necessarily say it's my least favorite, but it will offer me the greatest concern. Other than that, I have a contradiction for you. I love teaching my night classes. They're wonderful combination of students. Those also will give me concern because they're long classes.
Right.
They'll go from 6:30 to 9:15, or if it's summer, 6 o'clock to 9:45. And
Right.
students are often coming from work.
I see.
And so there is a real challenge, more so than in a short class, to sustain the interest of the student for that length of time. So it's, again, not least favorite, but very challenging to try to make sure that I can do that, so that student isn't leaving at 9:30 thinking, oh my goodness, I feel overwhelmed. But they're thinking, it was a long day, but I'm glad I came.
Right.
And I want every
Definitely.
student to think that, so I don't want to give short thrift to the day classes, but I think it's a little bit easier in a class that's an hour and 15 minutes than a 3-hour block of time after a long day of hard work.
Definitely.
So,
And would you say there's classes that are just always a little bit harder, or are they all just overall an even mix of good and
I
bad?
think they're all different. I don't want to sound cliched, but I think every class has its strong points and its challenges. So it would be really difficult for me to pick one subject that would, I think they all have their challenges and their strong points.
All right. I could agree with that. And now, during your education, what was the most difficult thing you had to learn?
That one was easy. Math. Statistics. Research. I love research, but the statistics were the most challenging. And I guess I needed a little bit of tutoring, and my dear husband is an accountant, and he tutored me, and I think that might have been the most challenging thing for him as well. But I did well. I got through it. I ended up, getting an A in the class, but that was definitely the most difficult class that I took. I do not think in math. I wish I did, but I don't.
All right.
So.
And now, just sort of to end this off, what are you doing when you're not being a professor?
I'm always a professor. Now, what am I doing? Well, I'm a mom, a wife. Were you thinking of a hobby or just an interest? Put you on the spot there.
But, I guess hobbies. So I guess
Okay.
other focuses of your life, really. I can only assume that your main focus would be being a professor.
Right, and I spend a lot of time prepping for that. I love to go to the movies, but again, even there, as you know from being in class, I don't completely step out of being a professor, because I'll be watching a movie and think, oh, that would be great for my class, and then I'll search out the movie and try and use clips in class. But I love watching movies, love basketball, so I like sports, I like movies. I like to eat, don't like to cook. And being with friends, family, the usual things.
Very cool. That's
Don't
fine.
have any exciting hobbies.
Oh, I'm sure your life is a lot more exciting than you make it out to be. That's perfectly fine. And I'd just like to thank you very much
Oh, you are so welcome.
for your
It was
time and consideration.
interesting.